Hello, everyone. Back for another Talks with Freedom Fighters. Today we have Simon Esler on. He is a committed defender of families and the lost art of free thought. We need more of that. A winding career path as an actor, ordained minister, and mindfulness entrepreneur led him to becoming a professional content creator and independent filmmaker. And guys, I'm really excited for this one. I'm so excited. I'm shaking a little bit. I watched some of the films and I am blown away. And I hope you guys are going to go check those out right after this. We're going to have little clips for you. Simon, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I think it was John Paul Rice that suggested having you on, and I'm so happy to have you on here.
John's a good man.
Yeah, yeah. I I see how actor, ordained minister, mindfulness entrepreneur could lead to the type of content that you're producing. Can you give a little bit of a background on your journey to film production?
Sure. Yeah. I majored in theater in university, and I was part of a program focused on collective creation. Um, it was at the time it was called Creative Ensemble, and they gave us what they called devising techniques that were a means of creative storytelling that allowed you to collaborate with others. And they really gave me some foundational ways to tell stories that have stuck with me. One of the primary ones being that you have to restrict yourself correctly or use your restrictions so that your creativity is freed. And that always really stuck with me. And so playing with that in the theater space and learning how to tell stories that way really eventually evolved for me when I got to the point where I realized that we were in this modern war, that we're in this fifth generation war, and that we're surrounded by psychological operations and all sorts of propaganda and weaponized information. And so I started to look at that the way I looked at things in theater school was, here are my restrictions, here's the ways in which I'm being restricted. And so I want that to inform what I'm going to put into the world and be of service to what I'm seeing around me. And so that's sort of how I got from those beginnings and sort of found through that winding path a thread that has stuck with me.
I think that's a common thread amongst all of us that are trying to provide something of wholeness and well-being, and I don't know, just coming back to sanity to the world. Is that once you see the things that are happening in the world, you have to be of service. You have to be out there doing something. Otherwise, what is this all for? So that's amazing. I'd like to. I was gonna wait, but I'd like to play a cut from Cut
All
and
right.
just give people a taste of what it is that you're producing. Um, just amazing, amazing stuff. And then we could jump into that if you want. We could jump into that topic. I'd really like to.
Okay.
Here we go.
Feeling like a boss, staring at the stars. Doesn't matter the cost, 'cause everybody wants to be famous. I'm calling the shots. See you over at Mars. Doesn't matter the cost. Seems like everybody wants to be famous.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that clip was?
So we're looking there at the impact of celebrity culture and the evolution of the cosmetic surgery industry and how that really started to impact teenage girls. And, I'm starting there with great purpose because while this film does end up in the discussion of gender affirmative care and how that's impacting girls, it really takes things back to some of the cultural changes that we allowed that really created the foundations for an explosion of girls attempting to transition to the opposite gender. And that explosion would not have worked without the cultural changes that we all sort of enabled much, much further in the past than we realized. And so to me, that takes it outside of the political trenches that this issue seems to be sort of trapped in, that it's a left versus right issue. And it helps people to understand that the direction of our society was in many ways headed in this direction long ago, and we haven't been mature or aware enough to really track that. And so it's a sort of a call to awareness in terms of these kinds of issues, so that people can take an opportunity to step out of the political narratives and maybe see it from a broader context.
So I wasn't able to watch the entirety of Cut. After this, actually, I'm going to start it over. I'm going to watch the whole thing. But what is the history of this? I mean, when did people start needing plastic surgery to feel comfortable in the world, and how did that all begin?
So plastic surgery goes back to ancient Egypt, and it was actually a response, of course, mostly to war. The injuries, the horrific injuries of war, really prompted the development of plastic surgery in ancient Egypt. And so there's actually a papyrus that is one of the first known texts actually recording about plastic surgery. And, it was sort of based on a very if this, then that logic, the way that it was laid out. And it was about the kinds of surgeries they were using on the soldiers that had been wounded in these wars, sometimes construction accidents. So the foundational beginnings of plastic surgery is just about addressing, if this is a problem, if this is the wound, here's how we're correcting it. And it stays this way for a very long time. But what happens is at the end of World War II, the plastic surgery industry had been pushed very far by the world wars up until that point. It had developed immensely because the wounds had gotten worse and war had become, more endemic. And so when World War II ended, you suddenly had a huge industry of cosmetic surgeons with all this new equipment, all these skills, but there's no more war. And right there, you have the birth of the cosmetic surgery industry out of this response to war, and it becomes something entirely different. And the foundational shift that really happened there is that people were given the power to use self-diagnosis to receive life-altering permanent body changes. And that was very new. So before that, getting surgery, that had to be something prescribed. So as soon as people could self-diagnose and then go and get surgery, it opened them up to culture being able to affect people's bodies in a totally new way.
All of a sudden it became something to satisfy one's ego rather than to accommodate for serious injuries in war or serious injuries otherwise. So from there, so right after World War II is pretty much became the change in theme, but
yeah.
when did it then transition again into I don't really want to call it casual. I don't think it's ever really casual in this sense, but for teenagers, young women to feel that they are in the wrong body and that they need to reshape themselves to fit the mold of what they think is beauty or what they think is correct for themselves in the world. When did that begin?
Well, let me give people a sort of arc of understanding in terms of culture and the body. So it's nothing new that culture creates bodily changes, right? We know this is ancient in terms of tattoos and earrings and, tribal ways of expressing masculinity and femininity with, different body changes. So that's not that new. But when that's occurring in, these ancient tribal settings, that's really, that is a collective creation to create meaning and interpretation, right? What's different that's evolved in our society is that the production of culture has become something that is centralized. It is owned by a very small handful of corporations, and they are able to dictate huge amounts of our culture and define massive portions of our culture. So you have this increasing centralization of control over the production of our culture. And that, paired with the evolution of the cosmetic surgery industry, it gets to the point where, as with many, many things in all sorts of marketing and product development, the goal is to get younger and younger, get to the children. If you get to the children, then you have access to them for life. It's a unfortunately, that is an attitude in a lot of marketing.
Yeah, just like smoking.
Exactly.
I started smoking cigarettes at 9 years old.
There you go.
Yep.
Kids are always like tapped into trends, right? So when that trend, the creation of trends is controlled by a centralized group, we have a very dangerous situation. And now it's controlled to the extent that it's promoting these permanent bodily changes. And this is what I found that really inspired me to make Cut, was that as I was researching all of this, what I found was that around the same time that there was this exponential explosion of girls getting gender affirmative surgery and, testosterone injections. At the same time, there was an exponential rise in girls getting not just breast augmentations, but more than that, labiaplasties, which is cosmetic genital surgery. And so to me, it was a big realization to note those two trends rising at the same time, because I recognize that the breast augmentations and the labiaplasties, that's not coming from some left-wing queer theory ideology. That's a cultural norm that has been creeping on us for a long time. And so really, at the same time, you have girls permanently modifying their bodies, girls who are disembodied to an extent, and they're adolescent girls, and you have those trends moving together, which is what pointed me towards these larger forms of demoralization in our culture at large that need to be identified to understand what's occurring.
Yep, I see that. I also, I did an article recently about how the U.S. today is mirroring in a lot of ways the Weimar Republic. And one of the fundamental and obvious mirrors is the transgenderism movement, the total devolution of our family unit, our societal norms, our virtues, our principles. And so Weimar Republic, they had, I forget his name right now. I'll think of it in a minute. But they had a clubhouse basically where they were doing surgeries to alter the sex of young people that were coming, because they had made it appear in the same way that we're seeing it made appear to be today. So I think even before World War II, we were seeing it. It was just like the smallest amount of it, though. This was like very, very localized to Germany and in this certain place. But we also had eugenics, and we had a lot of other things. And I think the evolution of it is that it all ties together into what we have today. So like we didn't, it doesn't just pop on the scene. It, like you said, it's like this graduation of the devolution of our values. And there's probably so many other aspects to that, but I think personally, I think this sort of thing that we're seeing today started in Weimar Republic, started with this movement that was created.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of echoes from that time, and certainly the idea of it being sort of high culture, that it's supposed to be like the peak of culture, and it was very much looked at that way for them in the Weimar Republic. And that met a really tragic, violent end, to my understanding.
Yep.
So I actually see that being cited by both sides. I'll see people who are against the gender ideology influence citing that as a warning, but then I see people on the left citing it as like, look, that was like a genocide against our people, all this stuff. And it's interesting the way people will frame it according to what they want to see. But I think you could pull back even further, and to my understanding, there's a pattern of civilizational sort of collapse being preceded by a lot more androgyny, the archetypes of the masculine and the feminine becoming more vague and watered down. That pattern has also repeated itself throughout history. And so there's something, there are these larger cycles that we seem to be tied up in, which to me really promotes the notion that a big part of this is awareness, right? Is maturity through awareness as individuals and a collective, which I think is pretty interesting. considering that the war that we're in now is very cognitive in nature, right? We live on a sort of cognitive battlefield. And it's interesting to me that situational awareness in war, it used to be more tied to this notion of being sort of very primal on the battlefield with these heightened senses and like ready to fight for survival. But I think because war has evolved into fifth generation warfare, this warfare that's very covert and it's tied into the technological aspect of our lives very deeply, and it's difficult to see when an operation is actually influencing us. So I think because war has evolved in that way, situational awareness in war has to evolve. And so that's, I think, a big part of what I like to promote is just becoming more deeply aware of the battlefield of our daily lives, not in a fear-based way, but really in the cultivation of awareness, because I believe that will just lead to more mature choices as we navigate.
So after after the fall of well, Weimar led to autocracy. This is my contention. The pendulum swung way out, and the complete collapse of the identity of those people was gone. When the emperor he didn't die, he just left, kind of. He just was like, I'm done. But when he left, the identity was tied to that person.
Yes.
And so when he left, the identity was gone, and they were like, what are we? And it led to all this nonsense. And I think today we're experiencing the same thing. And I think we're going to experience the pendulum swing, where we have this crazy, I don't know what I am. And then the people on I don't want to say the other side, but the today what it is probably like traditionalists, Republican, deep Republican, conservative, whatever, very religious. The pendulum's going to swing back, and it's going to come way back the other side toward autocracy. This is what I think. And so we're going to experience. We're basically mirroring the thing with some uniqueness, but
yeah,
it's going to swing way back, and we're going to have a figure come in like, maybe it's Trump or maybe it's somebody else who will be the icon of autocracy. It'll be, way more structure, bring back traditional values, and that's what it sounds like what Trump is saying and what he's promoting. Not to say that any politician is telling the truth ever, but just to say where the mentality might go of the population. And really, when you look at it, it's like 1% maybe of the population is in the transgender category. Maybe like 5% realistically is actually homosexual even. So when you look at it, it's like when the pendulum swings, you have a very large population that's easily absorbed into the new momentum, the new direction. And what comes out of that is always terrible things, because we can't find balance. People end up getting hurt.
I think about this a lot because the peak of where we are developing, I believe, is really the capacity for free thought and individual authority, right? For one to develop one's inner authority. All these patterns that we look back on, one of the main struggles we have had is groupthink, is really what we do in groupthink and not realizing we're in groupthink, and then using groupthink for personal decision making. And this is what needs to completely go away, in my opinion. We shouldn't be using groupthink ever for personal decisions. And so we should be developing ourselves accordingly. And I think there is an opportunity to rise out of some of these historical cycles and some of that pendulum swing by having the individual develop this capacity to navigate their own choices without the use of groupthink. So I think
Renaissance rather than revolution.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room there for growth and development. And that's why I'm so intrigued by the idea of free thought on a cognitive battlefield. I think that the pressure of this battlefield is perfect for producing that. I think that's the way in which we're being pressured to grow and evolve. If you look at what the response of the world at large was to the COVID narrative, it was to use the pressure of that to just wake up. I mean, on a very foundational level. So these seem to be some of the ways, in which that awakening process occurs. So, I'm very interested in observing what those shifts in awareness look like.
I think I'm going to play the other video I have here. I think it's time for it. I'm feeling it. So this is another part of the film cut.
How has the transformation of plastic surgery into a cosmetic industry, driven by trends in body imagery, affected the population at large? What does it mean for developing bodies that these trends are not generated organically, but produced for consumption by a centralized corporate media structure with its own agenda and political leanings? Looking back on the if-then thinking that the earliest surgeons were applying, what does it mean that the plastic surgery industry has suddenly handed the if to the patient? What was the impact of giving the power to declare preconditions for surgery to women and girls living in a culture that is constantly declaring that bodies in their original form are an obstacle to self-fulfillment?
I think it puts it together really nicely right there. It's, what are we doing to our children? What is
100%.
happening? And especially for our daughters. And as a father myself of a daughter, who's against my better judgment, as my regular listeners will know, I'm totally opposed to public schooling and all that. But you know, I'm only half of the coin there for raising this child, and she might end up in public school, and I'm freaking out about it because I'm thinking, oh man, they might start. It's not even the teachers necessarily. The other kids who are learning this stuff might influence my daughter. It's likely to happen, especially where she's going to be going to school. So it's terrifying for me.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually I'm part of a movement to help parents move towards you know, an unschooling mindset, and there are a lot of parents in our community that actually have the same situation as you. You know, they'd really rather move their children in that direction, but there's maybe, you know, not agreement on the educational plan, and you know, people are curious about tools on how to navigate it. You know, like, can you continue to sort of unschool your child if they're coming out of the public space? So we're actually confronting some of those issues in that community. I can share a link with you if you want, because the community is actually offering workshops and resources for parents actually in that exact position.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difficulty is that her mom is my daughter's grandmother. So my partner's mother is a school teacher, and so there's a lot of influence coming just simply from that. But yeah, I would love to have any kind of links, information, and also whatever I get, I'd like to share with the world. And if you want, you can plug it right now. Where can people go if they wanted to get this information? And while you're doing that, I'll just say I want to invite you to come on Spaces. I'm doing a space on X every single Saturday, and I think it starts at 6 p.m. And either that or come on to a group podcast with David Rodriguez. You know David Rodriguez?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just had him on here. I don't know. He was one of the last few ones I had, and it would be great to get both of you guys and some other folks like Etienne de la Boissy Squared and some other people to come on and do like a group pod or come on Spaces and just talk about this stuff and get solutions flowing. So my space is on X every Saturday. It's all about solutions. Most of the stuff that I see in the world, and especially on X with these spaces, that people they're elaborating the problem more and more and more. They're saying, hey, we have problems, but nobody's saying, all right, here's what we can do about it. And so that's why I started a space on X, is to say, hey guys, we know the problems. Everybody pretty much knows that's here. I mean, even the people that are I'm pretty apolitical, but I'll say politically opposite being statists, say pretty much they want the same things. Almost all of them. The only people who are kind of way out there that aren't saying they want the same things are the really controlled, mind controlled people that are shouting at people in the streets and whatever. I think the term is the Karens today. So we have a vast population of people that knows that there's a problem, and nobody's providing real solutions to that vast population because a lot of us are censored. A lot of us are put in off to the side and not really given a voice. But if we can create a space for solutions, and it could be, it could be anywhere, but X seems a pretty decent spot right now, spaces, because it's a little bit more open at the moment. There's a little bit more wiggle room in there to reach people who have very wide influence. My last space, I had 2 people come on that had several 100,000 followers a piece, and they sat in with us for a while and listened to solutions thinking. And I wonder if they'll take that with them. Or at the same time, one of the guys that came on, I believe he was saying that X censored him. They killed his, what do they call it? They locked his account right when he came on my space.
Wow.
And so it means we're doing something right, I think. But yeah, so I'd love for you to come on spaces or do a group pod and chat with David and Eddie and some other people about solutions thinking.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd love to.
Awesome. So I would like to go into this more, but I want to branch for a minute and talk about how this topic ties into Marxism and communism. And this isn't the only film that you've produced. You've produced also The Red Shadow, I believe it's called, right?
Yep, Canada's Red Shadow.
Canada's Red Shadow. And it's a short 15-minute film, but it's really, really good. And it portrays the problem correctly. I think that we have people that are tying into the transgender movement and the emotional content, that's motivating that and leveraging that to promote Marxism/communism. And that's wild to me. Can you go off on that for a little bit?
Absolutely. It's important for people to understand that as you have these larger cultural changes that are going on that we've been describing, right, with the evolution of plastic surgery into cosmetic surgery, so you have that happening on this larger backdrop. You also have Marxism and communism evolving as ideologies over the generations. Originally, it was very focused on what's called material determinism, right? So the original communist philosophy was the idea that if you control the material production, you're really going to control the direction of society. That's going to determine the direction. And that's why they were interested in reversing the existing power structures, the hegemonies, that they saw with capitalists at the top. They wanted to change that power structure as a means of, changing who controls the material production. The main way that Marxism evolves from this is that it shifts its attention from the material over to the cultural, right? It becomes about cultural determinism. The belief is now whoever controls culture, the production of culture, controls the destiny of society. And so the new goal becomes to put the communist ideology at the top of cultural production and to invert all the structures in our society so that ideology is at the top. So that's the main way that communism and Marxism evolved. And within that, you have this focus on identity. And this is what arguably weaponized communism against the West so effectively. In the Western world, we were very focused on the individual, right? You had this idea of individual autonomy and the capitalist hero rising up. So because you have that ideal already in the West, the focus of cultural Marxism on identity as one of the means by which we can take control of cultural production, it was very effective. We were all so individually minded because the way the West had developed. And so that really plugged Marxism and communism into our culture very effectively and allowed for the spread of this neo-Marxist warfare to get into our cultural institutions, our educational institutions, our governmental institutions. It very much spread like a virus. So that's the evolution of Marxism occurring. And again, this is in the backdrop of these other big changes. You come back to the centralized control of cultural production. this being controlled by a handful of, corporations. And so you plug that into this neo-Marxist ideology that says, identity is basically something you can completely reconstruct, and that to rise up against the existing oppressors, you have to be anything but just a heteronormative guy or girl. Pretty much everything but, it's the whole minority story. And so that narrative has infected the minds of the youth. And it's basically a neo-Marxist hero narrative where they see themselves as the victim in one particular narrative, whether that's about gender or race or sex. It could be any of these things. And so they take on this idea of themselves, and it's very destructive. And it's destroying our youth actively right now.
Again, just terrifying being a father of any child right now. It's like, what kind of lives are our children going to experience, our progeny going to experience one more generation down?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, when we look at it from the position of like pressure and what the pressure of the war is beckoning us to do, how we can leverage the pressure of the war. You see the absolute explosion in homeschooling in response. It is occurring, but you also have people who are finding ways to navigate the public school system, who sit down with their kids sort of every day after and talk about what they've learned. You have a lot of people altering the way that they are educating and raising their children in response. And frankly, the public education system was always set up to squash free thought. From the very beginning, that's what it was designed for. It was imported from Prussia. Okay. It was basically brought here as a kind of Nazi mindset that was about using the educational system to produce obedient, unthinking soldiers and bureaucrats that would, serve the higher ups in the nation. It was designed for that. We took that model and we copied that model and we brought it to North America. And it was this factory style of schools. That's why schools are so much like factories, with all the kids in a row and the bells that ring in shifts. So school was already for that. But people allowed that for a long time and weren't aware of that. Now that it's being infested with the woke mind virus and weaponized to a greater degree, now it's waking people up. But you can see how a lot was really allowed by us, and we didn't recognize what was going on to a great extent. And so again, it's just, I think, a call to awareness and maturity around what's really going on. And I'm a part of a lot of communities where I really see parenting evolving in incredible ways. It's like super, super inspiring.
Yeah, David talked to me about that a little bit as well, and we went into how there's basically mutual aid societies growing around homeschooling, where parents are sharing the responsibility, and that also frees their time up and frees their money up. They're not having to put any money toward any kind of mandated schooling. They're not having to use their time up for that, and their children get a better education. There's mentorship programs that could be done. There's all sorts of different solutions there. All it takes is for a group of parents. I mean, it starts with one couple, or if it's a single parent or whatever, but starts with one parent and, goes from there. You can get 10 different parents together and have a society of people that helps each other to raise these children, and frees up the time of the parents, makes it possible to do. I mean, the finances don't even really count at that point either. If you're doing this as a collective, maybe you put them toward like enhancing the quality of the education by doing different activities or something like that. But there's all sorts of really, really fantastic things that can be done with just saying, I don't want to participate in the school system. And by the way, I'll be showing this video to the other half after this as well. It's
oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, there's really something to be said about our cultural ideals and what they really mean to us. What we're really willing to fight for. I think there's an idea that, homeschooling your kids or creating an alternative educational path for your kids is like too difficult, or you'd have to give up like a job that you need. And I think to a certain extent, people are entrenched in that attitude because our culture does not uplift the reality of what we're really doing when we're honoring our children. And that really has to do with like a legacy keeper mindset, where we're actually living with awareness of the next, there's this old Haudenosaunee concept of living for the seventh generation, right? That we live now for the seventh generation. This is a mindset that could arguably be uplifted culturally, so that this is our natural way. We understand the importance of guiding our children correctly because we are, in fact, influencing generations to come.
Yep.
And this is really important to recognize because in the war that we're in, the enemy that we're up against, and this is speaking of, a network of sort of globalist elites that are seeking to centralize power in the world by dissolving the sovereignty of nation states. And they're waging fairly sophisticated fifth generation warfare doing this. And so it's important to recognize that, we're up against this intent to destroy the family unit, and their mindset has been a legacy keeper mindset. The group that we're up against that is influencing the world with all this social engineering and this movement towards a centralized, world government, this has been going for generations. There are family legacies involved in the development of this plan, and they span generations because they understand that you can use family legacy to achieve incredible things, that when there are stable families maintaining one legacy over many generations, the accomplishments, the mindset is completely different. So we are up against people who have been thinking this way for a long time. And so to me, it stands to reason that we need to respond accordingly and uplift that mindset in our culture and become legacy keepers in that regard, because that's the correct response in terms of the war that we're in.
I absolutely agree. I think we have to start calling them by their true name, though. Globalist parasites. They're not elite. There's no elite globalist out there. These people are parasitical human beings, supposedly, that drain the life out of billions of people for their own profit and gain, and for their own legacy to their children, so that they can rule when they're gone. So these are parasites.
Yeah,
Their
no,
behavior,
I think
their entire life structure, it's parasitical.
No, absolutely. It is important to understand, and there doesn't need to be a lot of people like this in the world for this to be important, but to understand the severe psychopathic mindset of if there's just a handful of powerful people, the depth of like evil, what you would call evil, that is in the world, that is present in the world, we have to be able to process just the reality of that and understand that there are people that are not functioning in a way that would really even be recognizable to us. And my understanding is that one of the struggles of people who operate with this sort of, Luciferian or satanic way of going about life, who operate via those sort of principles, there becomes a struggle where you just really never have enough. And there's a kind of addictive life path that is born from, choosing that way of sacrificing others and constantly oppressing others and living your life that way consistently, that level of service to self. My understanding is that it gets to become a kind of psychopathic, addictive way of living where there's never quite satisfaction and always the need for more. And so it's actually like a really deep and strange form of suffering. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are some people that function like that in the world, and they do have quite a bit of power. And it's, important to reconcile that that's the planet that we live on.
Right. I think I talk very aggressively, and I talk about hanging. I have an article that's the argument for the public hanging of pedophiles, police, and politicians. But what I'm really talking about is the psychopaths. And I have an aggressive stance. I got into a thing on the last podcast I did because with Rory Morick, because he's a kind of fundamentalist, I think, Christian, and he says the path forward is through the gospel and peaceful engagement in kind of evangelizing folks. But I get it from voluntarists all the time of any event, and it's like we have to be utterly peaceful. In my mind, I'm like, if somebody comes to your door or if somebody breaks in your house, rapes your family, steals your shit, and takes off, if their intent is to do that and they break into your house, are you going to let them do it? If they've done it, are you going to let them get away? For me, it's a hell no. My line is very, very deep in the sand. I have a gorge between me and any kind of damage done to my family. So the damage has already been done, and it's been done to billions of people. I think these people need to be hung, and it does. I think it wouldn't take that much effort. It just take the people saying, "Yeah, we're done with this." But at the same time, not to promote violence or incite anything with those words, because I don't want to be assassinated tomorrow for saying free, utilizing my free speech. But there is also the methodology of that we can practice peaceful expatriation from the system. And I want to bring this back around to the legacy systems, because yes, there is systems used by these parasites, these globalist parasites, to continue on their wealth, their knowledge, their holding of power, all these things. And those methods are through trusts, social clubs, and not being true citizens of the same government that the rest of us are citizens of. And so, and I talk about this as a solution, all is kind of one system that we could utilize, but it is having social clubs. I have a social club called the Warriors of the Rainbow Lodge, not oriented to the homosexual rainbow flag, but to the prophetic rainbow peoples, and how we're going to come back and regreen the earth, prophecies that have been stated by indigenous cultures around the world for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And so, having social clubs, mutual aid societies, putting assets into trust maintained by trustees and trusted people, utilizing old systems, getting allodial titles to all of our assets, and expatriating from the federal government. And by doing each of these things simultaneously, we actually exit the system of control, and we can utilize the same legacy systems that these people are using to protect their own. Everybody can do this today. Every single one of these things, trust, clubs, allodial titles, expatriation, everybody can do this today. And so let me plug some people now that I've said that. If you're interested in expatriating and figuring out what that even means, because you don't have to leave the country to expatriate from the federal government, post 1868 federal government, you can go to pacinlaw.us, pacinlaw.us, and get involved with L.B. Bork, the Red Amendment, talking about how communism became a legal status quo after 1868, and also talking there about allodial titles and getting trust going. And stay tuned to Liberty Uncensored on Substack, because I'll be putting out a lot of content about how to build a trust, not just talking about how trusts are great, but actually how to do this, and more about social clubs on there. But these are the legacy systems. These are the tools that were built and are used to continue the power structure as it is today. And we can use these to take it all back. We can do the same thing that they're doing with better intentions, with goodwill, and take back our power today.
There's this really simple, beautiful pattern that is unfolding with the war that we're in and the changes that are, ongoing with humanity. And it's really just the pattern of decentralization, right? This is happening en masse through all these different systems. All of our systems that rely on this absurd centralization are collapsing, and we're moving in the direction of decentralization. And I think what's interesting there is that logically, you can then conclude that we're not really going to see large solutions that are about these massive collective behaviors. I believe there's going to be less of that, because you're going to have this decentralized sort of effect ongoing, where people are going to be developing solutions in response to their unique situations, where they are in the world, what's really unfolding, how their community maybe is being attacked and what resources they have. So you have this really cool pattern of that ongoing. And I think that's really inspiring because to do that correctly, you have to engage your physical domain. You can't only use the digital domain to develop your awareness of the war, right? You have to understand how this war is impacting your community and maybe how this war isn't impacting your community. Maybe you saw something outrageous online and it's crazy to see that that's happening in the world, but maybe it has nothing to do with where you live, And so getting that physical domain engagement and using that to develop your response and how you decide to correctly find more sovereignty, I think that's amazing to track, because we're going to see solutions and ways of doing things that are new, that are totally novel, because we're experiencing this era of decentralization.
Absolutely. And now that you've brought that up, I got to plug one more thing. The Cult DAO. If anybody's interested in cryptocurrencies that are actually moving forward in a great way, privacy coins and projects that actually matter, systems that actually it's not egalitarian democracy, because that's slow tyranny. It's just that you have the choice of how the coin operates by your investment, and so and how the project goes, and it's funding the revolution. That's their whole thing. And so if you're interested in finding out more about that, it's cultdao.io, cultdao.io. Highly suggest people go on there. You can also go on the Telegram group. You'll get way more information if you go and look up Cult DAO or Cult on Telegram if you're on the Telegram app. And let me actually also plug you right now. You're also on Substack, and I didn't know that, so I'm going to recommend you on Substack as well. And everybody just go check that out. I went through some of your content on there. It's really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I got some good up and coming articles I'm working on. Should be solid.
Now I forgot that I had another clip here, and I don't want to forget it again. So this is from the Canadian Red Shadow. That's what it's called, right?
Canada's Red Shadow.
Canada's Red Shadow. Sorry. So Canada's Red Shadow. Check it out. Awesome 15-minute video.
And I never suggested that someone who's concerned about parental rights is somehow filled with hate or intolerance.
If you look at the various curriculums, you'll see that there is not what is being said out there about aggressive teaching or conversion of kids to being LGBT.
We do not need to be having literature that's showing boys how to suck dick.
He's undoing my belt. I'm reaching into his bedside drawer for a condom.
But they're weaponizing the issue of LGBT.
I'm a sixth grader. I'm a sixth grader. I'm a sixth grader. I'm a sixth grader.
It makes me very, very sad that as a teacher, my profession is going to be the one to indoctrinate your kids. And my profession is going to teach your kids that they have rights that go beyond what you say in the home. And our government is going to use our kids to change our culture.
It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations without being challenged or counterbalanced.
Yeah.
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 It's right there.
It says it all. Yeah. Everybody go share this video. I mean, it's an awesome video. That's just a part of it. It's 15 minutes long. You got to go on to Simon's website, which is, you can see at the bottom right there, and go and share this video.
Yeah, it's a good one to get out there, because I made it based on the principles I was just describing. I went into my physical domain. I went into my community. I have this question: is it Marxism? Is there Marxism involved? I go. The Marxists are there. I record the Marxists. I mean, it was all just like all those principles. I went. I saw how this war is directly manifest in my community, and then I tried to use that as a tool to help people understand more broadly how Marxism has evolved and infiltrated our communities. Because really what's happening here that I described in this film is a very clear microcosm of the larger macrocosm of how that's happening everywhere. So it's kind of a map of how it's occurring in all of our communities. And so that's why I made it as just something very shareable and social media friendly, because I want people to share their stories and their understanding of how they see this coming into their hometowns.
So on that, how do you suggest people to go forward and engage their communities to create homeschooling, or to just educate people on the totality of problems facing us? How do people go about engaging their communities in the best way today?
Well, a big part of that does come back to sort of what I was saying earlier, that you have to engage like what the local situation is. So for example, the laws in terms of homeschooling are very unique, throughout Canada, throughout America, different states and different provinces here in Canada. They have different rules and regulations as to what you can and can't do in terms of homeschooling, or the way you educate your children. So you first have to understand what those things are, because that's how you're going to then find the communities that are correctly responding to your local situation. So for example, I was in an interview maybe like 6 months ago with some guys who had they had developed what you were describing earlier, a kind of network to educate their children. So there were a whole lot of public school teachers who were fed up with what was going on. They wanted to leave their jobs. All the parents got together, said, hey, if we pitch this much a month, it'll cover the teacher's salary. We're going to hire these teachers to be with our kids. Because it's such a small pot of kids, they only have to do it like 2 or 3 days a week. The kids are free the rest of the week, because homeschooling is like that kind of one-on-one schooling is much more efficient in the public school system. So, they develop that in accordance with their local laws, because some local laws say you have to have certified teachers teaching your children. If you're going to homeschool, I think in California, if you're going to homeschool your children, you have to be a teacher, or they have to be with a teacher. Conversely, where I am in Canada, in the province of Ontario, it's one of the freest places in the world. It is 100% government hands off. We don't have to do anything. We are free to educate our children in whatever way we want. And so we are pushing that to the absolute maximum. The other thing, I can really only share from, my own experience and what's worked for us. And I'll say that our approach has been very, very much about getting to know our children so deeply that we can help them follow what they are passionate about and interested in, and understand them deeply enough so that what they need in terms of education and experience is born of who they are, not us taking a preconceived curriculum or theory and imposing it upon them. So our focus is very much on them developing their intrinsic passions and their inner authority to make personal decisions without anyone else. And then that being installed correctly allows them to make the choices that help them thrive.
So we're getting close to the end of the hour. Can you talk about, so these aren't the only 2 films that you've made, correct?
That's right. So I have a docu-series called Superorganism, and that's a 6-part docu-series, and it explores the war on the family as it is being waged by, this, as you said, this parasitic class. And it explores that in contrast with the cultural ideal of the family unit as a superorganism. I really am interested in exploring cultural ideals in response to, of course, what is cultural Marxism. And so I stumbled upon some interesting research that explores the idea that the family unit is a superorganism designed to actually generate legacy on many different levels, spiritually, psychologically, physically. To a great extent, what I discovered was that we are naturally legacy makers in the way that the family unit functions, that we are automatically passing on, sub-linguistic forms of legacy knowledge to our children all the time. But what we want to do is become legacy keepers as opposed to just legacy makers. We want to really be consciously doing that. And I explore that cultural ideal in Superorganism, and people can find that on my website, simonesler.com.
Awesome. Is there any projects you're working on right now? Is there anything new that's going to be coming out?
Yeah, I have a bigger film project that I've been very slowly working on for some time, but it is exploring um, the idea of waking up to this war through direct personal experience and the evolution of war. Um, the concept is really about the trenches of this modern war. And so because we live in a cognitive war, it's really about the cognitive trenches and what it means for us to be entrenched in groupthink and to wake up to that process and to understand the darkness that we're up against correctly.
I think that you are on the forefront of the you're an awareness maker, and I love it. I love the meme makers. You know, the memes are amazingly effective, I think.
Oh yeah,
And there's like a million new memes every day. I
it's the
can't keep
best.
up. There's so many good memes out there, and but you know, taking it into the film space is taking it to another level. It is really being able to dive in to the meme, to the whatever it is, the topic, and really explore it. And so I want to suggest everybody go to simonessler.com/watch cut and purchase that. It's like $13 or something. And I'm telling you, I didn't even watch the whole thing, and I'm already like, I would have paid 25-30 bucks for it. And it's already amazing to that extent. And I got to go after this and watch the rest of it. But I really highly suggest people go and do that. And on that point, support content creators that are doing these things. I mean, you have to support because it takes time and it takes energy, and more than that, there's risk associated when you're putting out content that can get you a lot of heat on the other side. And I'm very familiar with that. I get heat pretty consistently for the things that I say because I say them very strongly. You know, censored across the board on pretty much everything. And so, yeah, and on that point, go to libertyuncensored.substack.com and throw me $5 a month or $30 a year, half the monthly price, and support my putting out content as well and be able to do these interviews and podcasts and all the articles that we're putting out. And the more people that help content creators financially to continue doing their work, the more great work can come out. So if you appreciate this sort of thing, go and support. Um, I'm so happy that I had you on, and I really hope that you'll come on Spaces on Saturdays at 6 p.m. and also come on. I'll put something together. I'll put a crew together for a group podcast. And guys, stay tuned for this because if this comes about, it's going to be really, really, really good. Solutions oriented conversations about the real problems that we're facing in the world today. The fundamental problem that if we start taking action today, we can come to a better solution. We can come to something that's so great, and we start working together on it. And so just imagine we get David, yourself, Eddie, and I'm not even going to name everybody else, but there's so many people that would be great for this. So we're gonna put something together for that. And
Right
let me do one more thing. I got 1 more minute. I'm gonna play this video again. It's only 30 seconds long, and this is from Cut again. It's the beginning of Cut, and I just really love this. So I'm gonna play it one more time.
Feeling like a boss, staring at the stars. Doesn't matter the cost, 'cause everybody wants to be famous. I'm calling the shots. See you over at Mars. Doesn't matter the cost. Seems like everybody wants to be famous.
I'm probably going to be censored, and this is going to get taken down on who knows wherever it goes. And so make sure you guys get out there and share this podcast and get it out as far and wide as possible. This is the information that we need to get out. Thank you for coming on, Simon, and thank you to all the listeners.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.